And now I have another great pleasure and honor because we have a second award, the Distinguished Service Award. The Distinguished Service Award is the highest honor awarded by the tax section. The award is reserved for individuals who have had a distinguished career in taxation and who have provided an aspirational standard for all tax lawyers to emulate. It is my honor and pleasure to recognize our 2025 Distinguished Service Award recipient, Eric Solomon. You have a detailed summary of Eric's career at your table, but I would like to mention a few of the highlights before recognizing him and inviting him up to address you and provide some remarks. Eric was raised in Princeton, New Jersey, by parents who instilled in him a love of learning and a belief in the value of an education as a source of opportunity. Eric studied classics at Princeton University and earned his JD from the University of Virginia and his LLM from NYU. After working in private practice in New York and as a partner at Drinker, Biddle & Reith in Philadelphia, Eric assumed the role of Assistant Chief Counsel Corporate at the IRS, later joining Ernst & Young. Eric, as a principal advising on M&A, but the call of government service led him back to the Treasury Department in 1999, where he served for a decade under the Clinton and Bush administrations, concluding his tenure as Assistant Treasury Secretary for Tax Policy. After leaving Treasury, Eric returned to EY to co-lead the National Tax Office. Subsequently, he became a partner at Steptoe & Johnson here in DC, and then at Ivins, Phillips & Barker, where he still continues to practice. Eric's tenure at Treasury was marked by government effort to curb the proliferation of tax shelters and measures to address the 2008 financial crisis. Eric was a leading member of a team that developed a system, including legislative proposals, regulations, and listing notices to help the IRS combat the tax shelter problem. And to deter users and promoters of tax shelters and identify returns requiring audit. Eric also served a key role in reforming Circular 230. The combination of clear standards and aspirational principles provoked changes in tax practice that have helped sustain the tax system despite increasing complexity and reduced resources for administration. In addition to serving as the ABA's tax section chair from 2018 to 2019, Eric served as a member of the executive committee of the tax section of the New York State Bar Association, the president of the American Tax Policy Institute, and co-chair of the Practicing Law Institute and the DC Bar Conferences. Eric's career also includes 30 years teaching corporate tax at Georgetown, where he has strived to guide hundreds of students through the complexities of Subchapter C. Eric's lasting contributions to the tax system and to the tax profession make it my immense pleasure and honor to recognize him with the tax section's highest honor, the Distinguished Service Award, for his contributions to the profession, the tax section, and now my great pleasure to welcome Eric and to hear his remarks.
Thank you, Alice, and thank you to the ABA tax section for bestowing this great honor on me. I'm sorry my wife Amy and my daughter Sarah couldn't be here today. Amy was a nursery school teacher for 20 years where every day she displayed her endless cheerfulness and patience. I'm also sorry that my mother and father couldn't be here today. Like Amy, both my parents were educators. My mother taught 7th grade English and my father worked for a nonprofit educational organization. And as Alice pointed out, they believe that education and the opportunity it provides are essential to success for each and every individual. And they also emphasize the importance of personal integrity. But I very much would have liked my father to be here today. My mother, in a somewhat charitable way, would describe my father as headstrong. And with that observation in mind, I'm going to tell you a little tax story about my father. Some of you may have heard this story, but I like repeating it. For several years, I prepared my parents' tax returns. And about 20 years ago, we were sitting at the dining room table, and all the papers were spread out on the table. And we got through the Form 1040, and my father was relieved that we were done. And I said, Dad, I'm sorry, but we're not done. We have to fill out this Form 6251 for alternative minimum tax. My parents lived in New Jersey. It was a high-tax state, still is a high-tax state, and it was likely that they owed AMT. So I said, Dad, we're not done. We got to fill out this form. He said, I'm 80 years old. I don't pay the AMT. And he swore he was not going to pay it. And I said, Dad, there is no exemption for 80-year-olds. And when I said that, he exploded. I told him it wasn't optional, and he had lost his temper. And he said, you're fired. I said, wait a minute, I'm your son, you can't fire me. You want to bet? And he fired me, and he filed his return without the 6251. And the IRS caught him and sent him a bill for AMT. And being a good son, I didn't say, Dad, I told you so. But it would have been really nice for my parents to be here today to show that I turned out okay. And to demonstrate that it's possible to make a successful comeback after you've been fired. Anyway, if you were to ask me what I'm most proud of in my career, it was my 15 years in government service at the IRS and then in Treasury's Office of Tax Policy. And if you were to ask me what I did in government service that was most interesting or most challenging, I think I would note 3 things. First, as Alice mentioned about tax shelters, I was a part of a team that was led by Assistant Secretaries John Talisman, Mark Weinberger, and Pam Olson, that addressed tax shelters in the late 1990s and 2000s. Tax shelters threatened to corrode the foundation of our tax system. We worked closely with the IRS in various areas in addressing tax shelters, including disclosure regulations, listing notices, and revisions to Circular 230. Second, I led the Office of Tax Policy during the financial crisis in 2008, where we had to address numerous difficult and novel tax issues on a moment's notice. And many of these issues rose as a result of urgent Treasury and Federal Reserve measures taken to halt the downward financial spiral. And third, in the mid-2000s, we were approached by the Department of Homeland Security. They had an initiative to seek taxpayer information from the IRS regarding undocumented aliens. And we objected to this initiative on both statutory and policy grounds. With respect to my years in private practice, I would mention 2 matters. First, under the leadership of Chair Karen Hawkins, we focused on inclusiveness in the tax section to expand membership and to increase opportunities to participate in tax section projects. Second, I am proud of my role as a professor, an adjunct professor at Georgetown University, which I've now done for 30 years. This was my 30th year. And I've strived to teach the intricacies of corporate taxation in an understandable manner. In closing my remarks, I feel constrained to say a few words about our current national situation. We often take for granted the goods and services that our government provides. And these expenditures, which include national defense and social programs, are essential to our country's stability and prosperity. And these expenditures directly or indirectly help all Americans, rich and poor. We have difficult decisions to make about the level of government spending in this country. In addition, We must address our national debt. Either our generation must control the debt, or our children and grandchildren will bear the cost. We cannot afford to pass this increasingly heavy burden on to them. The potential economic and social consequences are too great. As Oliver Wendell Holmes said, taxes are the price we pay for a civilized society. The IRS plays a critical role in collecting nearly all the revenues that fund our public expenditures. In addition, the IRS has been given the responsibility to administer numerous programs, such as family benefits and energy initiatives. We need an effective and efficient IRS. We need an IRS that can provide taxpayer services so that citizens can understand their rights and obligations. We need an IRS that can ensure compliance with the law so that the government collects amounts properly owed and taxpayers believe that the system is fair. We need an IRS that has up-to-date technology so that it can operate effectively in the 21st century. Finally, we need an IRS where employees are treated with respect, to whom we should express our gratitude for their public service. I make these points as neither a Democrat nor as a Republican, as I served as a political appointee in both the Clinton and George W. Bush administrations. Instead, I make these points as an ordinary citizen, worried about the future of our country. Thank you for providing me a few minutes to briefly reflect upon who I am, what I have done, and what I believe. I would again like to thank the ABA Tax Section for bestowing this great honor on me. I am truly grateful for the recognition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric, for everything you have done, and I know you will continue to do for the tax system and the tax section and the people of the United States. Thank you.